You've entered a world of captivating tales, where the past comes alive to help you sleep with intrigue. Please stay with us until the end, and you'll surely drift into a deep slumber. Close your eyes and let's begin. Today, we'll journey into the mysterious era of ancient Greek myths and discover one of antiquity's most famous stories, the myth of Perseus and the Gorgon Medusa. This version will be unfiltered, fully honoring the original interpretation, including all the tragic and shocking moments usually left unsaid. Get ready for an enthralling adventure. The story begins in the ancient city of Argos, one of Greece's most significant and oldest cities. At that time, Argos was ruled by Acrisius, a man of great power, yet burdened by deep superstitions. The king worried intensely about one crucial issue. He had no son to inherit the throne and continue his lineage. In those days, lacking a son was seen as a true disaster for a ruler, and Acrisius decided to seek counsel in the sacred city of Delphi. The Oracle of Delphi was famous throughout Greece. When Acrisius asked if he would have a son, he received a dreadful and grim response. He was foretold to never have a son, but his only daughter, Danaë, would bear a boy who would one day cause his demise. This prophecy horrified the king, and instead of hope for a bright future, he faced terrifying news of his imminent death. Upon returning to Argos, Acrisius pondered how to avoid his fate and decided to employ cunning to circumvent the fatal prediction. His daughter was the beautiful Danaë, renowned for her beauty throughout the region. However, it was now her beauty that troubled the king. To prevent the prophecy from coming true, he made a cruel decision: to construct a stone prison for his daughter, situated deep underground without windows or doors, only a small hole in the ceiling for air and light. Acrisius was convinced that his daughter would now be completely isolated from the world, and no one could approach her. However, he overlooked that sometimes the fates of people are influenced by the gods, especially the supreme god of Olympus, Zeus. He was known for his numerous romances with mortal women and could take the most unexpected forms to win their hearts. Zeus noticed Danaë's beauty and decided to seduce her. Even for a god, overcoming the prison's walls wasn't easy, but he faced no barriers. Zeus appeared as a golden shower, which silently penetrated through the ceiling's opening, and the droplets, shining like gold, touched Danaë's body. According to myths, the golden rain symbolized divine power and fertility. As a result of this mystical union, a boy named Perseus was born. News of his birth reached Acrisius, and the king, engulfed by rage and fear, realized he couldn't escape his fate. Yet, he didn't dare kill his daughter and grandson, knowing it would provoke the gods' wrath, especially Zeus's. Instead, he chose to cast their fate to the gods. Acrisius ordered a sturdy wooden chest to be made, in which he placed Danaë and her child Perseus. The king himself sealed the chest and cast it into the sea, hoping to avoid guilt over their deaths, believing that if they perished, it would be the will of the gods, not his decision. At that moment, Danaë and her son were in grave danger. Their chest drifted on the waves, obeying the will of higher powers, who had already decided that Perseus must survive and become a great hero. The chest floated in the Aegean Sea for a long time. It seemed they were doomed to die of hunger or thirst, but fate had other plans. One day, as the sun was setting, the chest approached the shore of a small island known as Seriphos. On this rocky and sparsely populated island, famous for its fishermen, a fisherman named Dictys spotted the chest washed ashore. Upon getting closer, he heard a faint cry of an infant and soft moans of a woman. Carefully opening the lid, Dictys saw a weary yet incredibly beautiful young woman holding a child. Amazed by this miraculous event, the fisherman realized that the gods had sent him these people for a purpose. He decided to help them immediately and take them to his home. Dictys was kind and generous. He not only sheltered Danaë and her son, but treated them as family. However, he knew that his brother, the island's ruler Polydectes, was cruel and unpredictable. Therefore, Dictys resolved to hide the rescued from his brother, fearing that he might harm them. According to ancient legends, Dictys and Polydectes were the sons of King Magnus and Queen Diactis. In other versions of the myth, their father was said to be the sea god Poseidon, and their mother a nymph. Despite their shared lineage, their characters were entirely different. Dictys was good-natured and honest, while Polydectes was notorious for his cruelty and unrestrained desires. Perseus grew on Seriphos under the caring eye of Dictys, who became like a father to him. The boy became strong, agile, and brave, displaying features of divine lineage in both his appearance and character. He stood out among other children for his strength and intelligence. His mother, Danaë, remained as beautiful as ever, becoming the object of admiration for all the island's inhabitants. However, such beauty couldn't escape the notice of the tyrant Polydectes, who, upon seeing Danaë, immediately fell in love with her. He was determined to make her his wife, disregarding her refusals and protests. However, one person stood in his way: Perseus, who had grown into a young man and was well aware of the tyrant's intentions. He sought to protect his mother from unwanted attention with all his might. Polydectes, in turn, saw Perseus as a rival and an obstacle that needed to be removed. One day, he devised a cruel and cunning plan. He announced to all the island's residents his intention to marry a noblewoman and demanded that each subject bring him a gift to honor this event. The tyrant specifically wanted horses, as he dreamed of holding grand and spectacular races to impress his bride. He knew full well that Perseus had neither horses nor any wealth, and deliberately placed the young man in an uncomfortable and humiliating position. Perseus's pride and impulsivity influenced his decision. Unwilling to endure mockery, he boldly declared that he was ready to bring Polydectes any other gift he desired, even if it were the head of the terrible Gorgon Medusa. These words were precisely what the cunning tyrant had hoped for. No one ever returned alive after encountering Medusa. Polydectes was sure that Perseus would also become a victim. This represented the perfect solution to his problem, removing Danaë's son and winning her over, a heart without interference. Thus, Perseus faced the most dangerous task devised by the cunning Polydectes. The young man understood the gravity of the situation, but he couldn't refuse, as he had publicly declared his intent, putting his honor at stake. Now, let's briefly leave Perseus and focus on the one for whom he prepared to embark on a perilous journey. To grasp the complexity of events, we must understand who the Gorgon Medusa is. Beneath the image of this monster lies a profound and tragic story entwined with beauty, violence, divine cruelty, and a distorted sense of justice. Once, Medusa had nothing to do with monstrosity. On the contrary, ancient myths describe her as one of the most beautiful women of her time. According to some versions, Medusa was born to the sea deities Phorcys and Ceto, ancient forces of the ocean. She also had sisters, Steno and Euryale, who looked terrifying, possessed powerful wings, bronze arms, and knife-like fangs. They lived far from humans at the edge of the world, amidst the cold, rocky shores of the ocean. But Medusa was different. She was mortal, gentle, and astonishingly beautiful. Her hair flowed like golden waves, her eyes shone with a soft glow, and her gaze was pure and calm. Her beauty stood out even among goddesses. Ancient poets claimed that no one could pass her by without looking back one more time. Yet, as is often the case in myths, her beauty became the root of her curse. One day, the god Poseidon fell in love with her. Medusa served as a priestess of Athena, the goddess of wisdom and chastity, and vowed to remain a virgin, just like the goddess herself. Breaking this vow was considered a grave sin. However, Poseidon, used to getting whatever he desired, didn't stop. His passion for Medusa was mad and overpowering, and finding no other way, he seized her right in Athena's temple. This moment became one of the darkest and most controversial episodes of ancient Greek mythology. Athena, witnessing the desecration of her temple, became furious, but her wrath fell not on Poseidon, who committed the blasphemy, but on Medusa herself. This seems unjust, and that's how this myth was perceived even in antiquity. Yet, it's vital to remember that gods had their own rules. Athena couldn't punish Poseidon since he was equal to her in divine power, and any open confrontation between them could lead to a clash of two great Olympians. Instead, she directed all her rage toward the one who was weaker and couldn't retaliate. Thus, the beautiful mortal transformed into a monster. Athena altered her appearance to strip away the beauty that once inspired envy and admiration. Her golden hair turned into a mass of living snakes. Her skin paled and lost human warmth, while her eyes became abyssal and dreadful, filled with darkness and suffering. From that moment on, anyone daring to meet her gaze turned to stone forever, as if the very earth sought vengeance for her unjust fate. Only her sisters remained with Medusa. Steno and Euryale protected her and sheltered her from curious humans and gods. They settled in a distant place by the ocean, where land ended and eternal darkness began. Among the rocks and storms, Medusa hid from the world. She didn't seek revenge, but her nature became a curse. Yet, according to legends, Medusa retained her mind. She remembered who she had been, recalled the temple of Athena and her unjust punishment. Her heart filled with bitterness and loneliness. This is why her image in ancient myths is dual. For some, she's a monster. For others, a victim. Greek philosophers later saw her as a symbol of divine injustice and the fate of women when beauty becomes the cause of suffering. That's who Medusa was before meeting Perseus. A mortal woman, once beautiful and chaste, transformed into a horrific being due to the faults of others. Let's return to Perseus, who now had to face danger beyond human imagination. The young hero understood that an ordinary person couldn't defeat a creature like the Gorgon Medusa, and that without divine assistance, his task was impossible. At this moment, when his fate hung by a thread, the Olympian gods arrived to help him, for his veins ran with the blood of Zeus himself. That's why the gods, wishing to glorify their demigod descendant and perhaps rectify the consequences of their past decisions, chose to intervene and offer him aid. The first to appear before the hero was Athena, the creator of Medusa as she had become. Despite this, she decided to help Perseus triumph over the monster. Perhaps she wanted to correct the injustice committed long ago, to soften the guilt toward mortals for Medusa's cruel punishment. Or maybe her motive was merely a cunning divine game where mortals remained mere pawns. Athena bestowed upon the hero a polished bronze shield, smooth as a mirror, telling him that this was the only way he could look at Medusa without turning to stone. With the shield's reflection, Perseus would navigate the battle while avoiding a direct look at the monster. Following Athena, Hermes appeared, the messenger of the gods, agile and clever. He gifted Perseus a razor-sharp sword and hinted that this wasn't all he'd need to accomplish his mission. Hermes explained that special nymphs, dwelling far to the north, held 3 key items without which the hero would surely fail. These were winged sandals that allowed him to fly, a cap of invisibility belonging to the god of the underworld, and a special bag capable of safely storing Medusa's head after decapitation. However, the path to the nymphs who possessed these items was unknown to anyone, and only ancient beings called the Graeae could hint where to seek them. The Graeae were sisters of the Gorgons, daughters of sea gods, who were also the parents of Medusa and her dreadful sisters. There were 3 Graeae, Enyo, Penfredo, and Dano. These old women looked so terrifying that even the bravest heroes felt fear and disgust at the sight of them. Their bodies were hunched and withered, like tree bark, and their skin resembled gray, wrinkled parchment. The old women's hair was tangled like a spider's web, but the most dreadful feature was their blindness and lack of teeth. They had only 1 eye and 1 tooth among the 3, which they passed to each other. Perseus understood that the old women wouldn't reveal the secret of the nymph's location without a strong incentive, so he devised a cunning plan. When the Graeae passed their single eye to one another, Perseus quickly grabbed it and refused to return it until they told him the nymphs' whereabouts, who held the magical items. The old women, blinded and frightened, pleaded with the hero to return their only eye. Only after they pointed him in the right direction to the nymphs, Perseus gave them his eye and continued his journey. Upon reaching the magical land of the nymphs, filled with flowers and light, he received the promised gifts: winged sandals, Hades' helmet of invisibility, and a magical bag to store Medusa's head. The nymphs also directed him on how to reach the Gorgon's lair and what to avoid in battle. The path to Medusa's dwelling was long and fraught with anxiety. The hero flew over lifeless deserts, crossed harsh mountain ranges and endless seas. The closer he got to the Gorgon's lair, the gloomier the atmosphere became. The air brimmed with a deadly threat, with birds and beasts avoiding these places. Finally, Perseus found himself at the cave entrance, surrounded by rocks resembling statues of ancient monsters. Stone figures of people and animals stood everywhere, petrified by Medusa's gaze. Carefully entering the cave, he felt a chill soaked in fear. The walls were damp, and the air was filled with the foul smell of stone and stagnant blood. Each step could be his last, so he moved extremely cautiously, using the polished surface of his shield as a mirror. This helped him see the monster and avoid its gaze, which turned everything living to stone. At last, in the reflection, he noticed a figure lying on a stone bed. It was Medusa. She slept peacefully, her body barely rising with her breath. Even in this horrific form, traces of her former beauty remained, which once captivated the world. Her hair, composed of snakes, writhed even in slumber. Perseus knew that the slightest noise could awaken the Gorgon, and then his chances of success would vanish. Taking a deep breath, he approached and raised the sword gifted to him by Hermes. With a sharp exhale, Perseus, keeping his eyes on Medusa's reflection, struck quickly and precisely. At that crucial moment, Andromeda, his wife, left him to seek new adventures. After Perseus avenged Polydectes and restored peace to his mother, it seemed he could enjoy a life filled with glory and love. Together with Andromeda, he left the island of Seriphus and headed to Argos, hoping for reconciliation and family happiness. However, fate reminded him of its cruel hand once more. Upon learning of his grandson's victorious return, Acrisius was filled with fear and fled Argos, escaping to Larissa to avoid the dreadful prophecy. Ironically, the festivals and athletic games took place in Larissa, where Perseus happened to be, unaware of his grandfather's presence. He decided to compete, eager to showcase his skills and honor his family name. Performing confidently, he soon became one of the main heroes of the celebration. But during the festivities, fate delivered an unexpected twist. During the discus competition, Perseus threw with incredible strength, but the discus veered off course and struck a spectator. An elderly man couldn't dodge it in time. The blow was fatal, and it turned out to be Acrisius, Perseus's grandfather. In that terrible moment, the prophecy fulfilled itself in the most tragic manner. Perseus was shaken, not wishing for his grandfather's death, even after learning of Acrisius's cruel actions towards his mother. This event hit him hard, forcing him to reflect on the cruel irony of fate and the inevitability of destiny. Afterward, Perseus couldn't return to Argos. Feeling guilty over his grandfather's death, he renounced the throne and exchanged kingdoms with a ruler named Megapenthes. Thus, Perseus became the king of Tiryns, where he ruled wisely and justly, founding new cities, including the famous Mycenae. His life was calm and happy. He lived many years with Andromeda, and they had numerous children, who became the founders of renowned ancient Greek hero families, including the great Heracles. Perseus left a lasting mark on history, and his fate became a symbol of how even a son of a god can find himself powerless against destiny. His life revealed the complexity of relationships between mortals and gods, as well as the tragic inevitability frequently mentioned by the ancient Greeks. This concludes the story of Perseus.